and weren't able to join us today. So this is the second installment of what is an every other month meeting of our Cultural Linguistic Competence Community of Practice, sort of an evolution of our former CLC subcommittee for those that are joining us today and don't know the history. So our agenda for today, calling the meeting to order. I just want to go through some welcomes and check in with those who we have on the phone to make sure we've accurately captured your attendance. We're going to review some of our existing CLC projects that we have going on and hopefully get your feedback on them. We want to explore some new programming for 2019 with you, see if there's some new things we could be working on. Then we'll have a round robin just so we can check in on any emerging issues that may be popping up related to CLC in your county, successes and kudos, and then any announcements, additional sort of non-CLC related kudos, as well as upcoming webinars and trainings. And then lastly, we'll just talk about our next meeting time. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add to the agenda? Okay, great. So the first thing is just to do some welcomes and introductions. If we can get your name, county, and affiliation. If you're on the computer and could type that into the chat box just for our records, that would be fantastic. And then for those on the phone, what we might do is go around in terms of affiliations. So do we have any family partners or those who identify as family partners on the line, and can you introduce yourself? Okay, youth partners? Okay, and how about system partners? Who else do we have on the line?
Barb Miller. Sorry.
That's okay. Barb Miller, great. I will write you in there, Barb. Who else do we have on the line?
This is Diana Brocious from the Pennsylvania Care Partnership.
Great.
And Mark Durgan.
Okay. Anyone else on the line or on the computer that hasn't been able to introduce themselves?
Debbie Ludden, family member, Luzerne County.
Okay. I think I see Lisa Kennedy has signed on. So we'll see. Hopefully she's able to use her mic at some point. Yep, there we go. I think that's everyone then. And so you have all had the opportunity to meet me, but just in case we had any new folks on the call, I wanted to share my face. So Kelsey Leonard, and I'm the Cultural Linguistic Competence Coordinator for the Pennsylvania Care Partnership, and facilitating the meeting for today. So I wanted to provide you with some updates of what we've been doing for the year related to CLC, and specifically our CLC webinar series. So in January, based on the feedback from our meeting that we had in November with our community of practice, we went forward with the webinar series and really structured it around some of the topics that you had brought up in November. And so we had our first session of the series in January addressing unconscious bias, the second session in March on the culture of the family, and then we have our third and final session for this year's series coming up on May 22nd. and that's understanding social media bullying, bias, and microaggressions. So I just wanted to check in with those who are on the call today, participating in the meeting, if you had any reflections or feedback related to the webinar series that we can take into consideration for the next installment in May, and then just more broadly as we look to revise it in the future.
This is Mark. I think first and foremost is we have been seeing a rather dramatic increase in our attendance in these webinars, including Chelsea's CLC work one. So I think that's, first off, I think is a really good success. I think it relates to our marketing, and then also I think some of the interest on the categories that we were kind of detailing. So I think that was both very positives. I think overall we had some good results from the feedback that we got from individuals who attended.
Yeah, we had some personal communications sort of after the event, emails that were sent to us from participants who really gave strong positive feedback, which is fantastic, and hopefully is a testament to the content being well received by participants. And to what Mark was saying in terms of attendance, we started the webinar series in January with about 40 participants. And we hadn't included a registration link, so we added that in for the March and May series. And for the March session, we had over 100 registrations, and during the webinar, we had between 60 and 70 participants, and it sort of stayed at a consistent 60 overall throughout the webinar. So we're definitely reaching a much wider audience than we previously have. In our past webinar series, we still had, fairly strong attendance, but these numbers have almost doubled and tripled in some instances. So we're really excited about that. I don't know if anyone else on the line was able to attend them or has any interest, but I just wanted, or any interest in providing feedback, but I just wanted to allow some space for that because there's always room for improvement.
I have not had a chance to.
Okay. That actually is another note that I should mention in terms of the series. We have been recording them, and we have uploaded them to the PA Care Partnership website. So people can go and download them and review them on their own. So we're really trying to build out that resource capacity of the website. Great. Well, one of the things I did want as sort of an action item that I wanted to touch base with you on, we've been exploring Skype versus Zoom. The January and March sessions, we really focused in on using. We had access to Skype. We're going to transition that for the May meeting to Zoom. Generally, a lot of our webinars for the PA Care Partnership, we're trying to transition them to using Zoom because Skype was being blocked by certain, IT departments and programs. So we're hoping that it will allow for more accessibility, but I just wanted to flag that for anyone that that's something that we're doing. And if there's any concerns around that, please let us know. Or if you have troubleshooting issues related to this to the transition between Skype and Zoom, just feel free to email me or keep me aware that these things are happening in terms of any tech issues. I think as a community of practice, we'll probably stay with Skype for our every other month meetings, but I will check on that with you guys and see what we're thinking in terms of maybe we want to switch to Zoom. But if we do that, I'll update the calendar invite and give you some instructions on how to use Zoom if you've never used it before. Okay. So the next item that I wanted to provide an update on is our CLC Pilot Project 3.0. That's something that's been approved with the new grant and for the new counties that are part of the system of care expansion. And we have, for those that aren't really familiar with this pilot project or what it is, there are three phases to it. And its origination started when I first came on to system of care in Pennsylvania about 5 or so years ago. We were trying to develop programming and implement CLC across our counties that are system of care counties, but there just really wasn't a confidence in in being able to implement CLC. One, people weren't really sure, what it is, and then sort of how what they already do is actually very much a part of the CLC umbrella. And even when they started to explore potential programming initiatives, they really struggled with getting from the exploratory phase to the implementation phase. And so, in conversation with the then CLC subcommittee, which is now sort of all of us as a community of practice, we came up with this idea of a pilot project where we provide a small resource grant to counties to go through the three phases of CLC programming to hopefully move them from exploration to implementation. And so in the pilot project, there are three phases. The first phase is to conduct some type of an assessment. These looks like it kind of cut them off, but really for the assessment, the idea is that there are three aspects: that you need to have a group of advisors, so that's youth, family, system partners, who really can come together and help with the work of CLC. So it's not just the burden, and really not even the burden, but I like to say the fun of it isn't just placed on one person, but it's really spread across, and you're being as inclusive and responsive to the diversity of community needs as possible. And then, the big sort of foundation of the assessment phase is that it's hard to know how to plan for CLC if you don't have a baseline. And assessments can be done at varying degrees. They can be self-assessments that are done at the county leadership team level, or they can be, very, very robust program assessments, organizational assessments that might also include building audits. And we've seen the full spectrum of assessments. But we encourage, because CLC is a journey and not this checklist, to start with some type of an assessment to get into the process of this type of evaluation and evaluative baselining to lead your CLC programming. And so once participant counties do their assessment, we help them to develop CLC plans, which are documents filled with action items for creating and enhancing CLC programming in their county based on what they learned from the assessments in terms of their baseline, their demographics, their needs for becoming more culturally responsive and having more culturally responsive delivery of care. And so they create these plans with action items, and then the last and final phase is implementation. And that's where the resource grants, we work with them to develop budgets, and then we help them to go through the process of implementing one of the action items off of their plans. So they really get to see, go, full force from exploration to planning to implementation. So that is a summary of what the pilot project has been. We're launching this 3.0 version in June of this year, sort of right after the conclusion of the webinar series, so it will really flow very nicely. A part of the pilot project as well is community learning. So we have, depending on who the pilot project recipients are, they determine how frequently they would like to meet. But there is a sort of standing meeting time that's set up to share successes, allow for some dissemination of educational materials and training around the phases, And so that will flow nicely in June after the webinar series is concluded. So there might be monthly meetings, it might be every 2 weeks, it's really up to the pilot recipients to decide, but there are consistent meetings that'll be around pilot implementation. So in bringing that to your attention, I wanted to check in to see if now in its third iteration, if the pilot project could be revised or should be revised, if there's new ideas for improving its framework, maybe we add a fourth phase, I don't know. But I wanted to allow for some space for our practice group to talk through that. And then, the second question is, in thinking about that, if maybe there's ways that we should be improving upon the pilot framework, maybe that also is in response to changes in our goals or outcomes related to cultural and linguistic competency in Pennsylvania. So any thoughts or ideas, I'd love to hear them.
Plus, I think if anybody was involved at that local level that can provide some insight or feedback, especially on, like, first and foremost was the award, which I can't remember what the exact amount was before. Was it substantial enough to kind of get the jobs done, or was there a need for some additional thoughts or requests that could have went through for some additional dollars, that kind of thing as well. And Lisa, I think you're on. So I think that you were involved in it as well. So we're always looking for that kind of feedback as well as, was there any kind of barriers to implementing it?
I see that Lisa might be trying to talk. Her mic goes unmuted.
Let me see if I can. There might be an unmute from our end. Try that now, Lisa. No.
Well, in answer to your question, Mark, around the previous grant award amounts, they were $2,500. And we had some counties that really could have used more in terms of what they shared for their barriers and challenges, because the type of CLC programming they were doing was maybe more required more technology. Like, so we had some folks that were working on translation, and that is both consultant intensive in terms of the human labor cost of it, but also if you use software, there's the software cost to it. So that some expressed concern that maybe it wasn't enough in that realm. We were able to sort of find additional avenues for seeking resources, though, once that barrier was expressed. But really, the interesting thing too is I also had participants who didn't use all of their resources. Because just the type of programming they were doing wasn't very resource intensive or funding intensive. And so the nice thing about the community learning model of the pilot projects is they actually were able to offer up some of their unused awards to others in the project who needed it for their implementation. So so there is that sort of synergy that can occur, and it was really sort of nice to see the collaboration going on.
Yeah, and so I think just so with the pilot project, so everybody knows kind of what counties that we're looking at right now that are eligible for this. It is, who we're working with, it is Crawford and Venango, York, Carbon, Monroe, Pike. Now, as we get this rolling out, we may bring on some additional counties. We're currently looking at 3 counties that have worked with System of Care in the past. To actually bring onto the grant. So that may bring on a few more, but we're not sure yet. that'll be I think a to be determined piece.
Well, if you do think of thoughts related to the pilot project or ways we could be revising it, feel free to send me an email or set up a call with me to discuss maybe an idea or an innovation you have for revising the existing framework. Um, we have a bit of time, maybe about a month or so, to still make changes before we really go full force with sort of marketing and getting everything laid out for the start in June. But definitely still have some time to do some revisions if people think about them.
And Kelsey, I think it would also be, and I know that we're kind of doing the pilot project, but I know that we have a couple, when we're looking at the community of practice idea, we have a couple people from outside of like our system of care grant. So I think that's another thing that it might be in the agenda already, but if there's work happening in other areas that would be beneficial to the group to understand.
Yes, if there if there's other work, if people have maybe a related initiative. Also of note is that the pilot projects and sort of those collaborative community learning sessions that we host via webinar, those are open to anyone. And really the pilot project is open to any county across Pennsylvania or any organization that might find value in being a part of that learning, that collaborative learning model. The only thing that we're not able to offer is resources. The funding resources are limited to those counties that are part of the grant. And so a lot of the sessions, those community learning sessions, as well as the templates and resources that are developed through the pilot by the individual counties, become resources, technical assistance resources that we will post to our website. And it looks like Lisa mentioned hi Kelsey, for some reason I can't be heard, but I will gladly send you some thoughts around the CLC pilot project from my perspective through York County. Yeah, thank you. I am not sure what is going on with the sound, and it looks like I think someone else mentioned that the chat box wasn't letting them in, so maybe might be even more reason for us to switch to Zoom. But Lisa, yeah, if your mic's not working or it's giving you issues, just feel free to use the chat box. I'll keep checking.
Yeah, Lisa, you can try to talk now. Let me see if that worked. Oh, wait, what if I do that? Let me see. Mute audience and then unmute audience. Not gonna let me do it. Wait. Maybe not. Let me see. Unmute. Unmute. All right, that may have worked. I'm not sure. Did I mute everybody? Yep.
There we go.
There we go.
I can see that their mics are not muted, but I don't hear them.
Yeah, I have no idea this system sometimes. Apologies.
Yeah, we're still working it out, but we thank you guys for sticking with us, and we're gonna be exploring the Zoom option, and so if we do change that for these community of practice meetings, I'll update the calendar invitation. So we also wanted to check in with you on exploring some new programming for 2019, and so related to this, we're curious if there are CLC programs you would like to see the partnership initiate over the next year, in addition to the ones that we've already talked about. Is there something that our community of practice could be coordinating around for National Minority Mental Health Month in July? And lastly, if there are resources you would find helpful for us to develop for counties and for others in Pennsylvania. So those are just some general questions I put out to sort of probe our thoughts on additional programming we could be doing, but open to your ideas or thoughts.
Does SAMHSA provide any guidance on the National Minority Mental Health Month in July? I know that a large focus of SAMHSA is on the Youth Mental Health Awareness Month. I wasn't sure about the national.
So I think aside from maybe just letting people know that it is, awareness about the month, they don't really offer a lot of guidance. I think in large part because it's a NAMI affiliated event. I guess it sort of originated from NAMI, but it is a recognized, national month through Congress. That was done in the mid 2000s through advocacy of family members and some folks that were a part of NAMI. So, which is sort of why they have I wouldn't say ownership, but they have a large role in its current manifestation. And they have some guidance or listings of different types of events that are being offered during July. But other than that, it's from what I've seen, it's pretty open. So Lisa says, what about considering adding some sort of monthly tip on the partnership website in this CLC area? That sounds really good. Maybe we can create some type of like a tip box or a tip section that has that relates to CLC. Yeah. And maybe that's something that we launch in July, saying that we're going to have this monthly tip, because then we could explore some ideas for that during our June meeting, about what should be the tip that we start to post, or that we post for July, or the tips that we post for July and August, and then every meeting we could decide on a tip.
And that's also something that we can, if we kind of get it together in a brief summary or even a link to the website if it's longer, that we can share on our listserv. We are getting a great number of interactions and open rates on that listserv. So.
Well, that is a great idea and very much actionable. So love it. Keep them coming.
Barb, I know that you're on. I was wondering if through the work that you're doing over in Bucks County, I always get it wrong, but I think that's right. If through some of the work that you're doing in transition age programs, if you're seeing anything, programs, or ideas that the youth or those young adults are initiating. So on, or next, I think it was just a phone number.
Yeah, because if Barbara, I know we sort of, when I came on to help a bit with the HG grant, we did a bit, and Bucks has a lot of material over the years in terms of how they've tried to implement CLC, but because it sort of wasn't included in the grant from the outset, I know that there were challenges and barriers to, I think, getting CLC to be as robust as you wanted. So I agree with Mark. I think your insight and experience into barriers and challenges, as well as maybe how you what got around some of them, or things or tools that would have been helpful to get around those, would be really great for us to think about in terms of what we can provide in the future and what we can try to build towards.
I see Lisa typing.
I'm not sure if there's a way to unmute everyone, Mark. When I look at it,
It doesn't let me unmute.
Yeah, it just says mute audience. It doesn't give me an option to unmute.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about this program. Participant actions.
Well, Barb, if you are on the line and you can't, your mic's not working, shoot us an email or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I do like Zoom better now, a lot more.
Well, definitely then I guess do the switch over. I think we already had this in the calendar prior to the Zoom account being purchased, so. Okay, and so Lisa says, what about even looking into discussing the culture of each system, as there are systemic things inherent to each siloed system? Yeah, we've really, we've heard a lot about that in terms of really being a want from folks to better address the culture of systems. I think we're trying to figure out how to do that. We explored maybe having a webinar on it. A part of me is feeling like we don't have enough, because I did some research to try and see, what the literature looks like on culture of systems, and it's actually really sparse, and I don't really feel like it could be tailored to Pennsylvania because, being a Commonwealth, we're really unique. So I thought about exploring how we could approach this question maybe through the lens of our state leadership and management team. Maybe we start with a targeted survey to them, asking them about the culture of the different systems that they represent, and then maybe using that data to try and think through future initiatives, programming, and collaboration. I think I hear someone trying to talk. No. Okay. Well, that was a bit of what I was thinking through, related to how to sort of get something under our wings related to the culture of systems. But I'm open to other suggestions on that.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit of kind of background to that, that was one of the kind of goals from our strategic plan. And I think it's still a goal, but I think in looking at it and thinking about it in the long run of things, with every county being a little bit different in their function, their role, even anywhere from even thinking about juvenile justice. Some counties carry firearms, others don't. So I think it's one of the challenges about kind of thinking about what the culture is. But maybe there's another way to think about it. It is what is the ultimate goal for the culture of the agencies, either from a statewide perspective or driving something from that way. It's difficult to say. I'm not sure.
Well, I heard back from Barb. She said her mic wasn't working, or she was talking but we couldn't hear her. So she said she'd give us an update via email on some of her thoughts on these things. So I'm wondering if that's an overall problem of the program of like the Skype right now, Mark. But
Yeah, I'm not sure. It
so
shouldn't just be.
apologies to anyone, but we could try and, if people want to try and talk. I don't know if Deb or Diana want to try.
Let me see. Everyone an attendee.
So Lisa says, I was thinking something similar as a survey, maybe having the SLMT work developing the areas of the survey and then push the survey out to SOC counties and through the PA FACS org. Yeah, I think that could really work well. So instead of giving it to the SLMT to take, have them work with us to develop the survey, to identify the questions around the information we want to know related to systems culture, and then sort of filter it out through their different entities. Yeah, I think that's a great framework. And then Diana is saying, how about a discussion information about white supremacy activity, recognizing it in Pennsylvania? Yeah, I think so. Diana, if you're able to type into the the chat box related to that, you know, what would is there like a mechanism or mode of presenting that information that you think would be most accessible to people? Is it something that you kind of envision as a webinar, or is it something you'd like to see as a community of practice? Maybe we develop a training curriculum around, or maybe a fact sheet on. We do have the infographic software, so that's something that we could be utilizing as a community of practice. A webinar with discussion after, and then see from there how to proceed forward. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So maybe that's something we can think about scheduling for the fall, Mark. Maybe one of the county collaboratives is a CLC county collaborative, and we talk about supremacy and racism and things like that, and how they influence and have influenced mental and behavioral health. I mean, I guess we probably could set up our own. We could just do a CLC webinar, separate from the county collaborative. But we could, we probably could explore that further in terms of what session type would be most beneficial. I might have lost Mark.
No, I'm sitting here. I'm thinking about how. I guess I'm just trying to think about how that topic, does it 100% relate to the work that we're doing? So I guess is it has it been identified as a barrier to implementation of system of care or that kind of thing? I'm just trying to think about ways to frame it. On how we can think about that.
And Diana also mentioned that she attended a great webinar on Muslim culture, and she thinks that we may be ignoring other faiths and how they affect the family and communities. And it's important to recognize that all of the faiths are different. Even within the Christian community, there's different ways, different denominations of Christianity. And if you lived around it, you would see how it affects the cultures of the schools. Yeah. And I'm not. I think Diana might have been typing. If you lived around it, you would see how it affects the culture of the schools. I think that may have been in reference to sort of the white supremacy topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there she goes. Well, and I think there might be a way to package. I think what Diana is getting at, there might be a way to package it so that it's accessible. And I think one of the things there is one of the things with that is this sort of challenge around sort of homegrown terrorism. And the connections to mental and behavioral health there, as well as sort of the cultural dimensions of that. And so
Can you hear me, Kelsey?
there we go.
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, I switched over to my computer. What it comes down to is, and this we have from personal experience, as you know, Maria's half Native American. And so she has run into that shunning or people looking at her down their nose, per se. All of that extremely affects the mental health of the children that this is happening to. It's a type of bullying. And everybody knows what happens with all of that. So I very much see it as very important, very integral to the whole community. And I don't know how you can not address that in any kind of a systems of care approach, no matter where you're coming from. It's like one of those elephants in the room. And I know something I was listening or reading to last week was talking about the rise in this mindset. I know for a long time, there was a sort of a slang saying out there that Pennsylvania was Little Mississippi, which is scary.
I've always heard it's Pennsyltucky, but.
Well, I heard that one too, but the other one was it's the Mississippi of the South or the North, you know what I mean? And I just don't think people talk about it because it's, I don't know, afraid to. That means bringing it out in the open, dirty laundry. I have no idea. Fear. I think there's a combination of things. I mean, I have neighbors not a quarter of a mile from me that when the family owning the house next to them moved in with their adopted biracial son, the father promptly hung a Southern flag out facing that direction. This is what I'm talking about. This is intimidation. And it's everywhere, just in different degrees. And once you're tuned into it, then you start to see it and you recognize it and you understand it. And I'm not talking about the what I call the little stuff, because I do get annoyed with some things that people get worked up about. I'm talking about stuff that is direct and has a purpose and does totally have permanent effects on children and families' lifestyles. It is out there. It was just a thought I had because I'm keenly aware of it. The other thing, and I don't know if it's can fall into the culture piece, but, and I have read information about this, we have an enormous amount of, I'm going to call them teen and young adult boys that have grown up with very little oversight, let's put it that way. And we spent so many years focusing on bringing girls, quote, up to speed. But as usual in the process, you know, we seem to be able to do one or the other. So now there is this, this group of boys that somehow have fallen into this pot. And they've kind of like raised themselves or are raising themselves. So it was an interesting, it was like a documentary or something on TV. And then I also read an article, which I cannot find anymore because I can't remember where I was at that I was reading it. But I do know there's information out there, but it's sort of like still under the surface. You're not seeing or hearing a whole lot about it. But it's enough that Mark knows. I have spoken to the CYS director and our mental health and a couple of police officers and detectives, and we're trying to pull something together because we have people in this county that are interested in being mentors. And they're rising from the bottom on their own. So it's one of those cases of, I think both ends are recognizing we got to do something.
And thank you for sharing that with us. I think, I think you're spot on in terms of definitely a cultural concern within Pennsylvania right now and society at large. I think it'll be interesting to see. We're going to try and address some of those things in the webinar session in May. And I'm sort of listening to what you shared, thinking about ways to also sort of maybe revise some of that content so it does more maybe clearly address that or give some activity examples using some of that information. So I'd love to hear your thoughts again, when we meet in June to see if it did address sort of what you were thinking and or maybe how we could build on that, right? Because then at that point people will have an entry point and have a little bit of foundational knowledge and maybe be a bit more trusting of the conversations we're having to sort of take it to the next level and address some of these more another phrasing that's coming to mind is kind of hard hitting, but often very personal relationship to these issues. So, yeah.
Another one that I don't know if anybody's ever addressed. I know we've talked about it, just sort of bandying it back and forth in different ways, but it's the way that the counties view the state. It is the way it's an impediment to much of the work that many people on the state level find when they go into the county, right? It's like you lower your voice and people from the state are coming. It's this mindset that it's us against them, or they're out to get us, or they're out to hide stuff from us. So that's another one that I thought of.
Well, and I think too, just before we entered that conversation, Lisa mentioned too that a good way of interacting with this material might be to also explore some of the changes in civil rights laws related to special education and mental health, and how that's impacting youth and families right now and across systems. So I think there's definitely a lot of space for thinking about the cultural differences, the rooting of these problems, and how they are related to some cultural worldview differences, and supremacy in a lot of ways, because supremacy is not really it's not a worldview. I think there's just this sort of innate advocacy to being better than another group of people based on race or some other identifier. So there needs to be a way to address that, and like you said, tackle the elephant in the room, but also, conscious that that we're not being what's the word I'm searching for? Off-putting, I guess, to our community.
Well, you don't want to put someone on the defensive because we all know what happens there. So yeah. I think keeping the emotion out of it, factual, and just real. I mean, these things do have an effect on people, and they aren't positive as a rule. They are, I mean, Maria had a little girl here. I had teenage girls all weekend. And the one was openly talking about how her stepfather is a racist. And they're moving to Mississippi, incidentally. But, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, don't have really any patience for that. And I said, I don't, that's awful. And she said, I agree. And, it's funny. It really, with many of the young people today, there isn't the same racial divide. Maybe it's because there's been more crossover. I don't know. But where it is, it seems to be very, very strong. But that's true, because if you even look at some of your countries in Africa that have been, civil war forever, it's one group against another. And I know people my dad worked with that were African American. They would talk about their own views of people who had different shades of brown or black, and how they viewed each other within that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in terms of, not only racism and supremacy, but then, as you mentioned, colorism. So I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we still have a lot of conversations that we need to have from a system of care perspective. And so that leads us with a lot of opportunities to build our programming. And, you kind of already let in, at the start of this in terms of what I imagine for the agenda of having a round robin about emerging issues. I think we really touched on quite a few of those, and so taking that feedback into consideration in terms of any maybe tweaks that we might want to do for the May webinar session, we'll definitely do that, and then thinking about how maybe that session can also be a building block for these sort of future courageous conversations. Just conscious of our time, are there any announcements or kudos or upcoming webinars or trainings that people want to make us aware of related to CLC?
I think that there is, but I did not get a chance to look at the Telegram yet.
Yeah, I don't know if the Telegram had any CLC ones this time around. I'd have to double check. I know that, just so you're aware, it's not open to everyone, but OMSAS has been doing or did a CLC training for their staff, that sort of high-level administrators and other staff. So we're starting to see that happen. It's been quite a while since OMSAS and sort of like at the state level has invested in CLC trainings, and so they have a CLC committee as well, and so we're really starting to see some active enhancements at the state level. So that's something to be aware of, and I think it was heavily influenced by the work we've been doing with system of care.
Yeah, and there actually is one tomorrow on, let's see, juvenile justice disparities reduction strategies through civil citations. Webinar will be presenting examples of cross-system partnership between system of care and juvenile justice to reduce disparities in arrests of African American youth. It's tomorrow at 1:30 to 3.
So that that might also be a really great one to attend and to think about in the context of how to approach some of these conversations we were talking about earlier, is thinking about specific instances of law or violations, as Lisa mentioned, some of the civil rights laws that have been rolled back, things like that. I think there's a way to sort of have a goal or an outcome be that we are addressing supremacy and racism, but the actual sort of content or mechanism by which we address that is more targeted. And and inclusive. So I think there's a lot of potential. So just so we know, as we're closing out the meeting, so we have meetings every other month. I set a standing meeting time based on the doodle that everyone did, and one of the best times was Wednesdays at 9 a.m. So we're gonna keep that June 19th meeting time for Wednesday at 9 a.m. If our participation is fairly low, we will, because initially when we met to kick off the community practice, we had about 20 people who participated. And that's been fairly consistent in terms of being a part of the email list and wanting to participate. So I just want to make sure we're picking the best time. But we're going to try one more meeting at this time, and then if we need to adjust, we'll adjust from there for our August meeting. So thank you to everyone for joining. If you have any questions or concerns, want to raise anything that we didn't get to touch on, I'm happy to hang out for a few more minutes.
Kelsey, this is Debbie Ludden.
Hi.
I know, it kicked in. I figured I'll try it. The transition conference comes up in July. I was just wondering if, when you were talking about, how people look at other people, I remember when Corey went to that, all the different trainings for the youth during the transition conference, and then there was trainings for the family members, how kids, even though they were all disabled, and that's why they were there, they had some kind of disability, whether it was physical, mental health, or otherwise, really were discriminating against each other. And I'm thinking of the culture where, you would think they all had a common bond. They had an IEP, they had accommodations in school, but they really did separate themselves because of their disability. And my thought is, if we want to become system of change and agents of change, I think it starts with the youth. I think when Diana said that, children are more accepting of other children of different races and cultures, but their parents may not be. I think that has to do with the integration of neighborhoods. It has to do with integration on TV, on, whatever. But I think we should introduce some of that during the transition conference, whether it be to the family members or the system partners that attend and the youth.
So who hosts the conference and when is it?
It's Patton or Patan, however you care to say it. It's usually in July. I would have to check the website, and it's held every year, annually. And the sessions, like I said, there's a track for the youth and a track for family members and a track for the teachers that attend or school personnel.
So do you think it's something where we should be submitting a session for, or do you know the organizers in terms of us being able to sort of be given a sort of general session for everyone? Or what's the mechanism by which you think the training should occur at Patan, at the conference?
I think it should be a session that should be offered.
Mark, do you know the folks who run that at all, or?
Well, that would have been Jim Palmero, but now he is over in Allegheny County. I'm thinking I just met her, and I can't remember her name for the life of me, but she's going to be sitting in on our SLMT meetings and participating for Patton. So that's something that we can reach out to. I know that I think by history, we had done some training there. I think we had a
Yes.
table set up too, but I
Yeah.
can't remember what the courses were that we did.
I think it was like System of Care and High Fidelity Wraparound, because Shannon
Yeah,
had done something before she's in her role now, and
yeah.
but never anything on cultural and linguistic competency. I think that would be a great place to introduce it, since our youth are in school a large part of the day, and the people that are instructing, those youth are there with them.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I'm always looking for new opportunities for us to sort of expand our network. I just sort of need, I guess, that connector. So if you know of someone or you get an email from them and you can forward it to me, and if there's an email from the conference that you want to forward to me, I can kind of explore how we could connect with them. And even if it's not for this year, maybe it's something that we do for next year, because it sounds like it's something that they offer yearly.
Right. Okay.
Well, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. I thought I saw Lisa typing, but she might have just been. I don't think there's anything. Let me see if there's something new there. Oh, okay. Yep, she did type a few things. Let's see. So Diana, social programs. Yep. Okay. Here's Deb. Angela Kirby. She said Angela Kirby is the Patan person. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, well that helps me. And if you, if either Lisa, if you have it, or Mark or Deb, if you've got an email related to the conference, I don't think I have one as of yet, and you want to forward it to me, then I can sort of do some back end research and try and link up with who, see who we might want to be in contact with about that potential of a CLC session. Okay, Mark, anything else before we end for the day?
I'm trying to think. I don't think so off the top of my head. No. But just to thank you all for participating, and again, we apologize about the phone issues. It's one of the reasons why we looked at some other alternatives, because we knew that we were having some challenges. So we will get better, we promise.
Yeah, and based on that feedback too, for the June 19th meeting that I talked about, we're going to make that transition to Zoom. So just be looking for that amended calendar invitation. And thanks again, everyone. I really appreciate you signing on, and we will upload the recording later this week. So thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.